And
why not
we're
both?
back. And we're back. As I tell the girls, I'm ready to start screaming or streaming. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Well, I know
hear
you guys can hear me. We already established that. I'm asking, are we broadcasting again?
It just said we went live again. So
okay.
Oh, thank God.
Email notifications. So.
While we were offline, we addressed all of your super chats. So sorry, guys.
What do you mean we, Kimosabi? I wasn't.
Oh, yeah.
I was not there. I'm not all there.
Okay, all right, but I think we should at least get to the read some of the actual article before we get into the super chats.
Yeah, let's start with the article. But Alison, you had your name in the chat before when it froze, and I still don't understand why it did that. What happened exactly?
Because you need a new computer, and we'll address that.
We just got me a new computer. This isn't. It's not even a year old.
All right, you need to.
We're going Macintosh next time. I'm not doing another PC. I hate PCs. I've hated PCs for 20 years. I'm sick and tired of dealing with PCs. Sorry to all the PC guys out there, but
oh my goodness! Oh my gosh!
That was my
NPC Macintosh.
Okay, I think French Honey Badger just had an orgasm. By the way, I can hear it.
Do you want to tell?
Yeah, I can actually feel it. It's kind of like that feeling like when you're in a nightclub and the bass riff is like really, really, really loud from the stacks, and you can actually feel it in you can hear it in your chest cavity.
Okay, well I cut my teeth.
That is how I heard French Honey Badger's orgasm there.
In terms of video and shit like that, I cut my teeth on Apple computers, not PCs.
Well, you shouldn't bite them then.
Well, I also cut my teeth on a piano.
For those of you who don't know the reference, French Honey Badger is a very much an Apple enthusiast.
Huge fan
of the
highest. Apple.
Huge fan of Apple. So there you go. Okay, what I wanted to say is I wanted to thank everybody. We got our legal fundraiser funded, so witnesses are all funded to go. I closed the fundraiser down this morning because we were funded sometime in the evening last night. I also want to apologize. I was dealing with WordPress and I was updating plugins when we had a massive plugin custom
cascade
page
failure.
Cascade
You poked one thing and then it wrecked everything.
Yeah, everything sort
That's
of
what
crashed.
she said.
So I had to go back in and reinstall the website from a previous backup. And that wiped out all of our fundraisers from the very beginning, which is choking me totally because that was a lot of work and I'm going to have to redo some. I'm going to have to redo Hannah and Prim's. That doesn't mean that we don't have the funds. It just means we don't have the wrapper that was counting up the funds for each of these different fundraisers. And most of the fundraisers were already complete and done and weren't live. So not a lot was lost there except history. I did manage to export my WordPress, do a WordPress export before all of this happened. However, I haven't been able to figure out how to re-import it back in because apparently the import has a maximum amount that it can import that is higher than what it can export at, or minimum amount that it can, a maximum amount that is lower than what it can export at. So
okay,
I'm like looking at this and I'm like,
Alison?
yeah?
Okay, so my guy is coming with me down to Calgary this weekend. So maybe you can hand him that and he can try and figure it out.
Does he have an experience with WordPress? Because if he doesn't, I would be afraid to do that.
He has experience, and he didn't have experience with IT when he was sent on site to completely rejigger an entire IT network. So.
Yeah, well, we can discuss this later. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for funding the lawsuit fundraiser number 2 that I created on Tuesday because lawsuit fundraiser number 1 crashed and burned and died in a fire and then disappeared into history.
And then was eaten by zombies.
And then was eaten by zombies and sucked up by, I don't know.
Zombies are assholes.
Tardigrades.
Jessica Valenti. Sucked up the tears.
Tardigrades absorbed it into their dehydrated bodies, and then they
popped out and made more tardigrade babies. Okay, all right.
Yeah, and then they went on a rampage, a homicidal rampage. and destroyed all of humanity.
Yes. Okay. So I want to apologize for that.
Because you broke WordPress.
Well, and the tardigrades.
God, Alison.
The tardigrades also sent off.
Oh, the humanity. You're responsible for the downfall of Western civilization, Alison. You realize that, don't you?
I'm actually hoping that'll be true. And then the rise of something that isn't so riddled with
tardigrades.
Tardigrade
civilization.
Yeah, tardigrade okay, well, this is like complete digression, all right? This is how we get a sausage that's just obscenely long, all right?
For those cocktail.
Yes, but
of the show, like,
it's okay because it comes.
Okay, are you talking about Alison? Is that what you're talking about? Because they sell those at my local Mac's store.
I thought that was
hot dogs that are longer than the bun.
I thought that was a
yes, it is. Of course, it is. Yeah, but
okay, but all right.
That would be a long wiener, and those are the best kind to munch on.
Reeling this back. I also want to apologize to the people who got like a half dozen emails during this website meltdown, including the ones who were like who were extremely upset with me because they apparently have been red-pilled by larger YouTubers than ourselves onto how I'm defrauding them money, and which you know I apologize for sending you 6 emails. That was a mistake. I'm not. Yeah, those other allegations I don't think are accurate. So there you go. Everyone's silent.
Okay, Alison, are you done apologizing?
No, I'm not done because I wanted to say
you Canadians and your sorries.
I have had interactions with Kathy Young. She called me very rude. It was for one of the articles.
It's okay. She called me anti-Semitic. So
yeah, no, and here's the thing. When I first met you, Alison, it was on Reddit, right? Under the username Typhon Blue, and you were pretty rude. No, super terse, super curt, super like, yeah, no, you can lick my butthole. This is, you know, you're a liar, kind of thing, right? You were pretty, yeah, no, you come across in writing as way more firm in your stance and uncompromising in your stance than you do in person. So I think that probably has a lot to do with it, is because you were dealing with her in writing.
Actually, one of my favorite things on Reddit used to be watching you shred feminists. Like,
oh yeah, no, because she would just fucking obliterate them. She'd like do 2 sentences and just like freaking annihilate them.
Like, somebody would come on and they would say something really stupid and mean, like simultaneously stupid and heartless. And, you know, Karen would write, you know, 16 paragraphs, and I would write 16 paragraphs, and I'd put in like 15 paragraphs worth of what I put in was links to things that prove them wrong. And Alison would say 3 sentences, just 3 sentences, and it would be better than everything we wrote, and it would be the person would not come back.
That was the blow.
Yeah, last blow, the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah, it was just essentially so Alison, you come across pretty harsh in writing.
Yeah, the thing is that I can see when people talk, I can see when they come across as being sort of disingenuous or rude or not really engaging in the subject matter with any kind of intellectual honesty. I usually can see exactly where to hit them. That is not necessarily like an ad hominem or an insult, but it just sort of devastates what they're trying to present.
Cuts the legs out from under them.
Yeah, that's and I don't really want to spend a lot of time doing it either because I'm quite lazy. So I'm not going to sit there and write 16 paragraphs when I can do that. And it comes out of my laziness. It's partially because I've been doing this for like 18 years. And I started out writing, you know, not necessarily the 16 paragraphs. I was never quite that invested. I would write like 6 paragraphs. But over time, dealing with these people in the same arguments over and over again, you start to see the similarities, and you also start to see the real glaring cracks that not just when you hit them, not just demolish their arguments, but force them to think about the problems in their own arguments. And that's why they don't come back.
I think there's two kinds of laziness. There's the laziness where you don't want to have to do it again, so you want to do it right the first time. And there's like the responsible laziness, I guess you could say, where you wanna get things right because you don't want to have laziness. It's do-overs that you're trying to get.
That's not laziness. That's efficiency.
Yeah, it's efficiency.
There's the don't work harder, work smarter.
Right. There's the laziness that leads to efficiency. The laziness that's the mother of invention too. Do I really have to go through all these steps? Can I eliminate some of them? That kind of thing, right? And then there's the mental laziness of not caring whether you're right or wrong, just as long as you feel good. I have a terrible amount of impatience with that laziness. And I don't have laziness as an excuse for why I'm rude to people online. I mean, I could say that's my excuse, that's my reason, but it's not true. It's because I'm an arrogant asshole. And I fully admit that. I am an arrogant asshole because I know when I'm right, because I've looked at the facts over and over and over again and dealt with these arguments over and over and over again. I've looked up the information. I've examined the problem from numerous angles. I've seen through a lot of the gynocentric arguments, and I know when I'm right. And when I'm in that situation, when I've dealt with this before, and the thing that they are bringing up is something I've already considered previously, and it's
100 times no less,
right.
I'm sure.
It's like you start to think of the people that do this as idiots, and I know they're not. Some of them are dishonest, some of them are deliberately dishonest. There's internet trolls that are dedicated to promoting a narrative online, trying to get people to be comfortable with giving up their rights and freedoms, and this is the narrative they're using to do it. And I'm very arrogant about my ability to knock them down, and it sometimes gets me in trouble. I honestly, I'm not rude because I'm lazy. I'm rude because I'm an asshole.
Well, like with me, like okay, the difference between me in writing on a public forum like Reddit and Alison in writing on a public forum like Reddit, right? Because Alison puts a lot of thought and detail into her videos and to her live streams and stuff like that, right? But when it comes to actually commenting in writing, is that she just goes for the kill shot, bam, right? And I go for the death of 1,000 cuts. Somehow me writing that death of 1,000 cuts is seen as less mean than her just shooting someone doing the proverbial shooting someone in the back of the head.
Mercy kill.
Yeah. So essentially, yeah, but I mean, like, I guess it comes across like she just, and that was one of the reasons why I was so, sort of attracted to Typhon Blue early on Reddit, as somebody to keep an eye on and somebody who I was interested in, right? Not attracted that way. So just freaking shut up. And okay, depending on the size of the super chat, we'll consider it, but it's gonna have to be it's gonna have to be big, guys. It's gonna have to be big. The super chat requesting that is gonna have to be super big. But
it's gonna have to be big, huh? That's what she said too.
That's right. That's
eventually I wanted to actually get to what the context in which she called me rude.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
I'm glad that you were attracted to me initially on Reddit, and I can hear Prim's frustration. So I'm going to let Prim speak her mind, and then I'm going to.
She's just giggling.
No, I did have my name in there this time. But basically, all I just
nobody's paying attention to the
we all are.
Well,
I am.
Whose problem is that?
Okay,
okay,
shut up, Karen.
Basically, I was just going to say, I think that the fact that everybody has their own style of discussion is really important, actually, because, for example, you know me, I'm not the aggressive style kind of person, but I have found that in discussions with people in real life or in my classroom forums, for example, by using that kind of strategy, that inviting strategy, you know, you can get people who are otherwise totally blue-pilled to be like, I wonder if maybe that you have a point there. I never really thought about it that way. So I think that there's definitely valid points to all of them. So yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to bring that up because I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, that I would agree as well, that there's different, and you shouldn't have to adopt a style that isn't your style. You know, if you are somebody who's a lighter touch, you want to create a way of people to enter the information without being very aggressive. That's you know, you do you. Don't like feel like you need to not be who you are. But on the other hand, people telling Hannah to not engage in the way she does because they say, oh, it turns people off. It's sort of like, it's like, no, actually, I've seen Hannah just methodically, like if Karen is death by 1,000 cuts, Hannah is just like death by steamroller. Very, very slow steamroller, but just like it's going like maybe 3 miles an hour, but it's
Hannah coming to kill me.
Okay.
Yeah, so Karen
from a fish called Wanda.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
called Wanda.
So you know, everybody has their own style, and you can kill with kindness too. I've seen that as well. Like I was in an argument on Kotaku in Action over the fundraiser, and someone had come up and had said essentially that they thought we were a fraud, or I was a fraud. And so I got this back and forth exchange with them, and we got to the point where neither of us were arguing anything of substance, and he was like, well, why are you still answering me? And I'm like, well, why are you answering me? I mean, at least I have the excuse of narcissism. And then the person said, well, that's just because if somebody talks to me, I will talk back. And I said, oh, that's very gracious of you. And then they conceded that maybe I'm not the fraud and the cheat that they alleged that I was. And then we just parted ways. So sometimes you can kill with kindness. So don't forget that. But remember, it's killing with kindness. It's not just the kindness, it's killing with it.
Well, and I've also noticed that like sometimes when I get involved in a Twitter fight, there'll be, you know, a lot of my followers involved as well, and there'll be somebody else involved who is exceedingly polite, just absolutely like polite to a fault almost. And you know, they're not conceding anything necessarily. They're just the good cop. And it ends up the person that we're dealing with ends up getting squeezed between the rudeness that I end up dropping on them with 1,000 links and the good cop that's asking questions and appears open to, you know, change my mind, that kind of thing, and they're answering them, and the next thing you know, they've talked themselves into a corner, and they have to either admit that they can't back what they're saying, or they a lot of times will block if they're dedicated to a narrative and they don't actually care about being right. And I've seen people concede things and, you know, say I hadn't thought of it that way and change their mind, or I wasn't aware of this information and stuff like that under that circumstance as well. And there are times, you know, when I see stuff that's frustrating that I've seen 1,000 times, and I'm like, oh God, hit it with a hammer. And there are other times when I see somebody who is spouting old narratives with an apparent belief in them and an apparent good intention, you know, that they're actually just trying to be a good person. And the first way to find that out is to give them information that contradicts the narrative and see how they react to it. And if I get somebody that's like, I was not aware of this changes the whole thing, or this changes the position that I'm coming from, you know, and stuff like that, I'm not going to bite their head off because they're learning. But I will, if I get somebody that is being, you know, complete and utter asshole, I can be an asshole too. That's basically where I was with this article. This post, when I wrote this post, I'm looking at this and I'm like, I hadn't read a lot of Young's stuff. In fact, the first thing I saw that when I read it, I knew Kathy Young's name was attached to it, was the article I was responding to. And I'm like, what is this person, like? Why is everybody, taking this as an attack on just a voice for men and not the men's rights movement at large? Why are people taking this criticism as if it's valid, even though 2 weeks ago the discussion was feminists just don't understand voice for men? And so I looked up her name and I started looking into her old stuff, and I realized that she had a long history, very long history, of getting that it's not right to cut boys out of education. It's not right to cut men out of the assistance programs for abuse victims. It's not right to set men up so that if they go to the cops and say, hey, this person committed this violent crime against me, and the person turns out to be female, the guy's going to get arrested instead of getting help. She knew all of those things, but she also had a long history of trying to figure out the causes and the potential solutions through the feminist lens. So it struck me that she is definitely aware that what is wrong to do to a person isn't changed by the fact that the person is male, and what is wrong for a person to do to somebody else isn't changed by the fact that the person is female. But I also noted that she is still feminist and dedicated to feminism and so on, and so I was comfortable going on and saying what I said in this post, which, believe it or not, is not the rudest thing I've ever said to anybody, although when I wrote it, a lot of people reacted as though it was. So I probably won't ever tell you guys the rudest thing I've ever said to anybody, because apparently it's really bad. But on to the beginning of the article. I've got this open in 2 tabs, neither one of them directly to a Voice for Men, not because I don't want to give a Voice for Men views, but because apparently something about my Windows 10 setup, which is exactly the way it came, can't handle something about a Voice for Men. So this is my solution. I had the image open in one tab and the article open in another. I titled the article, Can't We All Just Get Along? Now, the title has a history. When the 3 of us were all on Reddit, there would be these posts periodically to the men's rights subreddit from feminists. We don't understand why you guys aren't oh god, no, I'm not answering that super chat. Why you guys aren't coming to feminism to deal with men's issues? Why aren't you working with us? And we would have to answer. And this would go on about once a week, maybe twice a week. There'd be a post. Why aren't you guys feminist? Feminists are dealing with these problems. Feminists want equality. Feminists are about this. Feminists are about... So we've been dealing with this for years. And that was the gist of what they were asking. Why can't we all just get along? And of course the answer in the subreddit every time was, here is feminist history. Here are the laws that were lobbied for by feminists that we would like to see reformed to be gender neutral. And here are the times that there have been men's organizations and other organizations that have fought for reform in these legal areas, and groups like the National Organization for Women have opposed them. And we'd have that conversation over and over and over again. So can't we all just get along became sort of the mantra. There's another can't we all just get along post. No, we can't. We can't all just get along, and here's why. And so that was my answer to the post that we talked about last week with Kathy Young castigating the men's movement, and in particular A Voice for Men, for having too many feelings involved, basically, in our responses to the issues that men face. This was written On August 6, 2013, I created an account specifically for it. The account was called the Honey Badger Brigade. The post then. Can't we all just get along? It's an argument we've heard over and over from sources critical of the men's human rights movement. It gets handed to us by individuals who think feminism and the MHRM are two opposite ends, or think of feminism and the MHRM as two opposite ends of an activism spectrum, with feminists representing women and the MHRM representing men. The latest version of it, a Boston Globe editorial by Kathy Young, is a sugar-coated rehash of the same tone argument feminists have been using to try to shame MHRAs into silence for years. And for those who don't know, the H is human, men's human rights, activists, men's human rights movement. And this was something that I think it was John the Other and Paul Elam worked on. We wanted to remind people that this isn't a mirror image to feminism. We're not about gaining special rights for men that are just for men that nobody else has. We are about, as a movement, looking at human rights issues, and if something is a human rights issue, it applies to all humans, not just men, not just women, not just children. It's a human right, all humans. So that's where the human and men's human rights comes in. But feminists have been trying to shame MHRAs into silence for years. Shaming language claims that MHRAs are too loud, too brash, too rude, and talk too much about the problems the movement exists to address. She could have snatched the last few paragraphs of her article almost directly from a plethora of feminist commenters who have made the same argument in men's forums all over the internet. The writing doesn't reflect an epiphany or even an original idea. It's the feminist company line. The article is dishonest and self-contradicting. After describing all of the reasons why a men's movement is needed, she went on to try to use vague, unsupported accusations to shame into silence those responsible for bringing men's issues into the public view. Let's take a closer look at them. Quote, "Unfortunately, any movement championing one gender seems doomed to devolve into victim politics and demonization of the other sex. This generalization is a direct contradiction to her previous statements. Up to the paragraph containing this sentence, Young did a pretty decent job of explaining why the men's human rights movement exists, listing off several important issues. Her writing discussed some areas in which men are victims of discrimination and in which female abuse of men is facilitated by discriminatory law. After prefacing her personal version of Shut the Fuck Up with a conciliatory description of issues the movement exists to address, she went on to hypocritically deny their impact by referring to discussion about them and efforts to address them as victim politics and demonizing of the other sex."
Can I just jump in here real quick?
Yes.
Because there was something about this paragraph that just really bothered me, thinking about the exact way that she phrased this in that article. It's kind of just because these people can never frame their argument around how men feel. It's exclusively framed around the concern for women. So even when they're literally talking about men's rights issues, they always somehow seem to double back about how they're talking about their own issues might make women uncomfortable. She's phrasing it as, sure, men have all these issues, but women might be made uncomfortable. Whereas we phrase the issues as, these issues might make some people feel uncomfortable, but they are important concerns that need to be addressed.
Exactly.
This whole kind of thing just comes from a total lack of empathy for men or what men might be feeling. Sure, men are allowed to talk about their feelings and concerns as long as they do it in a way that still makes women feel uncomfortable, or that still makes women feel comfortable.
Well, what I found interesting, and what I continually find interesting about the accusations that, you know, the men's rights movement is, playing victim, it's engaging in victim politics, it's engaging in gender warfare. Okay, so what's the when one gender or people purporting to speak for one gender have declared war on the other, and have waged that war for more than 150 years, about 170 years now, right? And then finally, the other gender is like, some of them, right, are like, this is not okay, right? This one-sided bombardment of missiles is not okay. And we're actually going to defend ourselves, finally, right? And then they get blamed for turning it into a war.
Yeah.
Why couldn't you just lie on the ground and take it?
Alison, I don't know if you saw in chat, but I wanted you to jump in after Karen was done. You have a statement you have in chat there about the second red pill for women that I think is important and fits right into this spot, and we probably ought to point it out and discuss it.
Well, it might not be exactly what you were thinking I was going to say. I think there's a second red pill that maybe people like Kathy Young and Christina Hoff Sommers haven't really taken. It's not just the understanding that things need to be considered from the male point of view, and that true equality means that how women's actions affect men have to be considered along with how men's actions affect women. There's also an aspect that takes a while to contend with, which is the recognition that women, in addition to all of the citizenship benefits that we get, we have an additional power in society in that we, in many ways, define a positive identity for men. So men have a set of natural instincts to provide and protect for women. And that comes right out of their evolution. Karen could talk your ear off on exactly where those instincts come from and how they evolved and what they evolved out of. But they're there, and they're probably never going to go away. And part of the reason is dependency during pregnancy and the dependency of our offspring. So these are things that are never going to go away. Because of that, women have the ability to take those instincts and shape them for better or for worse, because they can do it in a society like ours and shape it to creating wonderful innovations and inventions and participating in an economic system that benefits us all. Or they can do it in more militaristic societies towards killing the infidels or the heretics. But what women do is they can take those instincts, and through teaching young boys the idols and the aspirations and the people through their stories, the people that they, or the men that they should look up to and emulate, they can channel those instincts into creating a positive society. And this entire aspect of being a woman, this power that women have, and women have it even if they don't have children, because when men are adult, they still have those instincts to protect and provide for women. So if women say, okay, you can protect and provide for me by kicking the crap out of every geek who looks at me the wrong way, they'll do it. She'll find a number of men to do it. Or if they want to get up and they say, well, this community is against me as a woman, they'll find swaths of men who agree and say, yes, the entire community, the entire community of men will agree with her and say, our entire community of men, they're all horrible harassers who want to get rid of women. All of us agree, and we're all the one man who actually isn't like that. Every single man in the community will think exactly the same thing, just like that scene out of Monty Python. Yes, we're all individuals. We all think for ourselves. Yes, all men in this community are harassers, and we are all the one good man who doesn't do that. Every single man will be saying that. So it's this powerful quality that women have to define these positive male identities and tie those instincts to producing society. And like I said, this is a neutral. This gynocentrism is a neutral. It can be bad. It can be good. It can be used in a way that's positive for everybody, including men, or it can be used in a way that's incredibly destructive and negative for everyone, for men, and then eventually for society itself. And it's something that I don't think that we'll ever get rid of. And in fact, it is something that is so rooted in our psychology that if we did get rid of it, we would cease to be human, in my opinion. And not because women deserve to be put at the center of society, but because there's an aspect of our psychology that makes it that we have to have the other, modeling the other to even have a self. And that's really, really complicated conversation. So I won't have it. I'll just say that It's a very big part of men. It's probably not going to go away unless you completely bioengineer men differently, and you would probably lose things like language, religion, philosophy, any kind of social or technological achievement. You'd essentially turn human men into chimps.
Oh yeah, no, you wouldn't turn them into chimps. You'd turn them into bonobos. Because chimpanzee males actually cooperate with each other, and they actually pass information from one to the other in terms of, you know, teaching each other to make tools and weapons and things like that. So they actually have, there is a culture within the intrasexual male dominance hierarchy in chimpanzees. There is no culture of cooperation or culture at all, really. Within bonobos, they don't cooperate. They're completely socially isolated from each other. But
there's a white pill here that I want to get into, because I know that you can talk at length, and I really respect all of the stuff that you have to say on this. I just don't want to. I know that we still have to get through the rest of this.
Right. Well, when you get done with that, there is something I'm going to go on with a little bit of the point I'm going to make about what you've said here. This is, by the way, what I thought you were going to talk about.
All right. So the white pill in all of this, the white pill in all of this is two things. One, gynocentrisms compete. So when you see, for example, a gynocentrism that we saw in the Dark Age after the fall of bronze, with all of these competing states that could not create any kind of cohesion, that was due to the gynocentrism that they were using, which is very much focused on this kind of sexual honor system, that you had to avenge the honor of your women. An anecdote would be, there was a queen who once created a situation in which her husband's second in command saw her naked, and he was honor bound to kill him and take the throne. And so this kind of machinations over women's honor were constant, and it was this constant sense of battle over this. And then you see Rome, where they're sort of moving away from that. You don't see this kind of seeing women's sexual honor as sacred in the same way, and you're starting to see more cooperative structures. It was still gynocentric because it was still centered around this idea of Roma, the personification of Rome and all of the Roman men serving Roma, but it was a far more functional and cooperative gynocentrism than what came before it. So the idea that gynocentrisms compete is something that I want people to start thinking about, because it constitutes an interesting sort of white pill. Gynocentrisms compete, and now in this age, there's going to be a lot more competition, in my opinion, between gynocentrisms, because while gynocentrism as a force will continue, there will be a lot more choice for men what kind of gynocentrism that they want to invest in. And that choice is going to be a very powerful shaper of how gynocentrism manifests. And that's what the internet allows. The internet allows men to occupy different community spaces with different forms of gynocentrism. We can see this right now. You can go to a community space like we've created, where the gynocentrism it's there, obviously, because we're women, but it is a space where we allow men to talk about their feelings with these issues and have their own perspective, and actually tell women in that space, you got to let men have this. You got to let men feel what they're going to feel, say what they want to say, and your feelings in the matter do not matter. Like they matter insofar as I can sympathize with you if you're upset or concerned, but you can't use them to silence them. So you can see a gynocentric space like that. And I'll be frank, it is gynocentric. I can't change that. But what I can do is I can use it to create a space that is beneficial for the men and I think the women in it. And then you see other gynocentric spaces like the feminist spaces, where they're essentially using women's sensibilities to identify sinners and targets and then ritually sacrifice them by throwing them out of the space or by ostracizing or abusing and bullying them. So you see that now we're seeing that competition between gynocentric spaces again. And we're going to see that as that ability for men to, any man right now in a feminist space could choose to be in our space. He could choose it. And then he would be within a community which would exert a powerful effect on his psychology that is more positive for him, in my opinion. Like maybe the feminist space is more positive for some types of men. You know, I'm not going to say that their choice is wrong. It's their choice. But you can see how that's creating two different kinds of spaces that you can occupy. And now you're creating the possibility for competition between those spaces. And it's that competition, it's that ability for men to decide which space, which gynocentric space that they want to occupy, which is going to really change the game board, the entire game board. Because now gynocentrisms have to compete for male interest. And that's like, that's, in my opinion, that's my white pill. I know that this is going to be an inevitable consequence of this incredible psychological mobility allowed for by the internet. I mean, before you were stuck with your female relatives, your mother, your immediate, the women who immediately surrounded you in your physical location. Now you're not. You're completely unmoored from them. And you can select whatever group of women you want that is going to create that sense that you're building a positive identity. You're building something, you're providing, you're protecting women, but can do it in a way that is far more beneficial for you. And there you go. I don't know if I made any sense, so I'll just
yeah, you did. And what I wanted to point out in relation to what Alison's been talking about here, I've been focused in the last few months, actually, the last several weeks, on the accountability gap between men and women, and it's actually pretty all-encompassing. There's a degree to which we don't recognize women's impact at all, when that impact is negative, when there are consequences of a woman's actions, and I think the ability for women to recognize the power of gynocentrism is very much related to that accountability gap. Gynocentrism is something that women can be accountable for. And it is very much like any other mechanism. It can be a weapon, it can be a tool, it can be absolutely nothing. And if it's absolutely nothing, in your mind at least, it becomes an accident. And not a minor accident, you know, where you have a social faux pas and you say the wrong thing and you're embarrassed for a little while, but a major catastrophic accident that can wreck people's lives. And that red pill moment is when you recognize the responsibility that goes with that power. And this is something that I think a lot of women get right up to, like, they get their toes right up against that, you know, that space where they're like, I have this power and I'm responsible for how I use it and how I allow other people to use me to use it to manipulate other people around them. And they stop there because that's a lot of responsibility. That's scary. Like finding out you have a gun built into your hand, like one of my old favorite animes from Cartoon Network, Trigun. There was a character, Vash the Stampede, had a horribly destructive weapon built into his hand. And imagine not being able to admit to yourself you have a mental block. I don't have that there. That's not real. It doesn't exist. And every time it goes off, you're shocked, or you have to blame somebody else, or you have to deny that it has gone off and deny all of the damage that it's done. And it would be a situation where you would run around everywhere you went. That type of destruction would take place. Everywhere you went, you would be the demon that takes down everything around you, if you didn't have a sense of responsibility for the working of that weapon, and you didn't make any effort to take control over it. And that is basically, like, in that story, for those who haven't seen it, I know there's a lot of people in the chat going, yay, Trigun references. You know, the main character in that story isn't human. He's an alien. They refer to him as a plant. But he looks human, and he lives with human, humans on a planet that they've gone to populate, and then they don't understand their technology, and he does. So he does travel, and he does go places to help people. But he's in a situation where he doesn't have control over that weapon. And he doesn't want to admit to himself his responsibility necessarily for that weapon or for the destruction around him. He's sort of in a war with his twin brother who put the weapon there, or who activated the weapon. It's been a long time since I've seen it, and it wasn't really clear to me when I watched it, but the gist of it is he's in that situation where every place he goes there's death and destruction because he doesn't control that weapon, whether he can't or whether he simply doesn't want to. And it is at the end of that series, he learns that lesson of taking responsibility, of not trying to live his life by just wanting things to be okay, but taking responsibility for the power that he has and how it gets used. And that's something that I think that's a huge factor in the conflict between women who are willing to look at the world through a non-gynocentric perspective in terms of what is versus what should be, and women who aren't able to do that. Part of the reason they're not able to do that is because even if they've gotten right up to that line of being able to see and take responsibility for the power gynocentrism in society hands women, and anybody who wants to or tries to use female victim status, female victim narratives as a control factor, that they've gotten right up to that and then don't go any further, that they don't take that responsibility. They can't deal with men's issues narratives. They can't deal with the discussion of that power, because in order to deal with the discussions of that power, they have to acknowledge that it exists, and they have to acknowledge that if they're women, they're responsible for their personal possession of it, their segment of it. It would be like, in the U.S., you know, we have this big gun debate. We have a lot of people who are for laws increasing limitations on who can or cannot possess a firearm, how they can possess it, when they can possess it, what circumstances they can carry it in, and so on. And we have people here who are for a reduction in those laws, or who simply don't want any further legislation. Imagine if you didn't get a choice. Imagine if you found out that you were going to have to carry, and you were going to concealed carry, and it was always going to be loaded. It would be a terrifying thing to learn. And you know, it's going to be a hard thing for women to admit, and it's going to be a hard thing hard load for women to pick up. And so we're going to see articles like this over and over again.
Well, I mean, they've been told long enough that, you know, oh, you don't have any power. You're just victims of circumstance or the patriarchy. So, yeah, I think it's going to take a fair bit of reconditioning to get them into that responsibility mode again, I think.
Yeah, and it used to be that women did have that. Like they knew. And society knew and acknowledged it. You know, this is not something that this isn't something that has never been acknowledged by society. It's something that feminism is a yeah.
Susan B. Anthony said in a temperance dinner in 1849 that everybody knows that women are the moral arbiters of society. And that if women, as a whole, decided that they would not associate in public with a man who had been drinking, no man would drink.
Yeah. But in any case, in a way, a large portion of feminism is a rebellion against taking responsibility for the consequences of women's use of society's gynocentrism. And nobody wants to admit that. You know, almost nobody wants to admit that anyway. And that's what we're up against. And so what we're going to find is we're going to even see the most red-pilled of non-MRA or feminist women saying things like Kathy Young said to us. And they're not going to necessarily even realize why what they're saying is an attack. But going on, so that's why, like, here she said, unfortunately, any movement championing one gender seems to be doomed to devolve into victim politics and demonization of the other sex. What's Kathy Young calling demonization of the other sex? If you look at the writings of the men's rights movement, there isn't a plethora of all women are like that out there. There isn't a trend of, like, there's the MGTOW movement, or the MGTOW phenomenon, because it's not really a movement. Movements are organized, and there's a common goal that generally involves changing society, and they're not organized, and there are a whole set of differing goals among different factions of MGTOW, so it's kind of hard for me to call them a movement. But the men's rights movement doesn't demonize women as a sex. The men's rights movement talks about aspects of female dysfunction versus male dysfunction, and how society's tolerance for areas of female dysfunction can be damaging to men. And we get told that there is no such dysfunction, and we provide examples, and then we get accused of demonizing women. And that seems to be what this response is.
Or we get accused of being obsessed with like, you know, like when I was talking with the New Republic, right? Emily Matcher, I believe her name was, on the New Republic, and she, you know, I gave, I guess, about 45 minutes of an interview on the state of the national conversation on rape, and most of it was talking about just consent and, you know, male victims and female perpetrators and things like that. But in the last 5 minutes or so, she asked me about false rape allegations. Maybe it was the last 10 minutes. And I said they were a problem, and she was like, she, you know, of course, tried to minimize that it's any kind of problem whatsoever, and asked me about some examples, and I gave her some examples, and the fact that I could actually pull examples off the top of my head, like Praise Martin Oguike, and Brian Banks, was evidence that I'm obsessed with the topic. And it's like, and she used, out of that whole interview, she used half of a sentence of that dog, shut up, final part of the conversation, to prove that I was, like all MRAs, completely obsessed and can't stop talking about false rape accusations based on a topic that she brought up and wanted to know about and asked me questions about. So, I mean, like, that's how they do that. That's how they essentially, it was the same thing with Vice News. You know, I'm doing a thing, or not Vice News, it was a Vice show called Hate Thy Neighbor or something like that. And I went and did an interview with them down in San Diego last September. And all the guy wanted to talk about was false accusations, right? So he has a whole table full of people, you know, people involved with NCFM, people who are, you know, lawyers, whatever, domestic violence workers and advocates and stuff like that. And all this guy wants to talk about is, he asks about false rape accusations. He gets told, yes, they happen, and yes, they're almost never punished. And then that's the entire topic of the conversation from that point on. And it's like, and then I guarantee you, and I haven't seen the actual program, but I guarantee you he'll turn around and say, these people are obsessed with false rape accusations.
Okay, so I assume that you're finished. So I'm going to just edge in here. The reason why, in my opinion, they're zeroing in on false rape accusations is because the idea that false rape accusations exist and are a problem is a form of heresy at this point in time. It's
yeah, like, I would agree with that, absolutely. Me too, believe her. Yeah.
Hashtag
I believe survivors. Yeah.
This is a form of heresy, and there are some actually very fundamental reasons why it's become a form of heresy. But that's why they zero in on it, because they're essentially a religious order, and you have just said that their God doesn't exist. They just have to hear it over and over again, because they just have to boggle at the fact that you're saying their God doesn't exist. And I'm sure that, I mean, did you notice that kind of attitude when you talked about the existence of false accusations from them, or were they just trying to milk it politely, but just this sort of gobsmacked, oh my God, you mean God doesn't exist kind of attitude?
No, it was just essentially, it was almost an eagerness to discuss it. They didn't appear to be gobsmacked or shocked or whatever, right? And of course they can't be when you're bringing up real cases, right? Genuine cases of women who made false accusations and the men ended up in prison or ended up in a 2-year prosecution or whatever before they were acquitted. You know, like, that's impossible to just like hand wave away, right? And, you know, Brian Banks is impossible to hand wave away. Praise Martin Oguike is impossible for people to hand wave away, because like, and he ticks so many boxes in terms of marginalization. Yes, he was a college football star, right? Sure. But he's like an immigrant from freaking Nigeria or something like that. He, you know, came over when he was 5, so he's an immigrant. He's a man of color, right? He still has a heavy accent. You know, like, he's not somebody that anybody would consider to be privileged just to look at him in the grocery store. He wasn't famous at that point other than at his school, and then his school, you know, whatever privilege he had at his school was completely, they just cut him loose when he was accused.
Well, okay, so I made didn't quite identify this, but it is, in my opinion, the interest and the fascination with it is because it's a form of heresy. And I want
I believe so. I believe so, but they don't act like they're super offended by the, like, I mean, they are offended by the idea that this might be a problem that has any sort of prevalence.
Well, the other thing is
right?
that they may just be assuming that they're going in and talking to a sinner, and they just want to expose your sin for the world, and they're just going to put on whatever face necessary to make you feel comfortable, to just disgorge all of your foulness. But I just wanted to get back to something that you said about Susan, I think it was Susan B. Anthony, who said that women are the moral arbiters of society. She's not actually completely right, because this is something that I found really fascinating about different societies. They all actually believe what Susan B. Anthony says. They believe that their women are actually, the way that their women take their men's instincts and tie them to the work of society, the greater work of society, that is morality. And they invest moral rightness in their women, in that particular society's women. Then they'll go out and they'll look at another society which is doing exactly the same thing, but the women of that society are taking men's instincts and investing it into a social work that might be in exact contradiction to the first society. And they'll go look at point of that society and say, actually, that society is being run by men's morality. You notice that it's actually that society is being run for men's benefit. The way that I saw this was interestingly enough, and this is why, to cite one of the super chats that we haven't taken, this is why I think Nightmare Fuel Podcast calls maybe me an Islam apologist, is that I've noticed this between the West and the Middle East. You will have in the West, they will point to the Middle East and they will say, while our women are the moral arbiters of our society, we're doing right by our women. And that's essentially, when you say we're doing right by our women, you are saying that you regard your women as the moral arbiters of what is right in society. We're doing right by our women. They are actually an expression of men wanting to do this, that, or the other thing, or men having control over society and making it and arranging it to their benefit. And then if you trot over to the other side and listen to the imams talking in the Middle East, they point to the West and they say, Look at the rate of rape of their women. Look at how they do not protect their women's sexual honor by making their women wear bikinis and making their women wear short skirts and making their women engage in lascivious behaviors that degrade their women. Look at how they have structured their society in the West to benefit men over women. That's what the imams are saying in the Middle East about the West. And so you got both sides saying exactly the same thing about the other. Our society is structured to benefit women. Our society is structured to benefit women because women are the moral arbiters of our society. But that society over there is structured to benefit men only. And what's interesting about feminism is it's brought that back home and said, no, our society is also built.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is the one true thing that Ezian has said. The one thing that she has said that I'm like, okay, that's actually a really, really good commentary. That's a really good apt statement. Is that, she said in the game of patriarchy, women aren't the opposite team; they're the ball.
Well, the point system, really.
Yeah, that's what you see with the people in the West who attack people in the Middle East, and the people in the Middle East who attack the morality and the you use and abuse your women, right? And you make them sexually degrade themselves and all of that stuff, right? That explains the whole fucking thing, is that they're using their women as a unit of measurement. Charles Fourier, right? Any society's level of justice can be determined by the degree to which its women are liberated, right? This is not a new fucking concept. This is like old, right? And what I find hilarious about people who, criticize Islam as being like a religion that's stuck in the, in the 4th century or whatever, right? Is their marital property laws and divorce laws and custody laws and all of those things, alimony laws and stuff like that. Those are all essentially, we didn't have anything that good, women in the West, until maybe the mid 1830s, and then again in 1865 with the Married Women's Property Acts. So, like, they had that since the beginning under Sharia, right? Those are things that have existed since the beginning under Sharia. A woman's right to hold her property as a single individual. Her husband has no right to touch it or spend it on anything or dispose of it. And if she divorces him with cause, he's required to support her. She can apply to separate from him, live in a separate household if there is a risk of injury to her, physical or financial injury, or injury to her dignity as a woman. She can set up a separate household at his expense, including servants if she's become accustomed to them, and all of these things, right? And only the courts could order her back. He could not force her to return without the court's approval. So essentially what you had was this system where since the advent of Islam, women under Islam enjoyed greater rights than Christian women up until the 1830s or the 1860s.
Well, there you go. You heard it from here. Your great-great-great-grandfather was a horrible misogynist bastard.
Worse than a Muslim.
You guys listening, worse than a Muslim. Like your great-great-great-great-grandfather, you find his grave, you should take a big fat shit on it.
And there's your quote mine for the show. Because none of the other stuff we've said tonight are quote mineable.
Let's get back to the article.
Why don't we read
let's get back to
super chats or something.
I was going to say, let's get
article.
Back to the article, and we'll go for the super chats momentarily. I do not have to leave tonight, so you guys are in for it. But here we go. All right, so we stopped with the demonization of the other sex. That's what we were talking about there, and I'll scroll back up here, and I went through the whole "shut the fuck up" statement. What she has said there is the next paragraph, and why is my computer going ballistic again? Goddamn thing.
Because it hates you.
Yeah, apparently it's this stupid touchpad. I need a mouse. Some things you never hear from women, right?
Super chats.
No, no.
Hannah needs a mouse.
I didn't even touch the screen this time.
Okay, all
it's
right.
Just jumping on me.
We can do some super chats while you
actually
fix it.
No.
No, I was gonna ask. I wasn't saying read the super chats. I was saying super chats. Hannah needs a mouse. Throw money at her.
I can buy a mouse. Mices. They're cheap. But I see. What happened is it went to the next size down. The text is smaller.
I'm seeing the length of this sausage, and I am weeping inwardly.
Yeah, I'm seeing the size of the text and going, what the okay.
Is the sausage gonna bump against your cervix, Alison?
That's painful. Anyway,
I have no comment.
I have hit the spot, guys.
None.
So stop.
Oh, God.
There's your other quote mine for the day. I've hit the spot, guys. Stop.
I'm gonna wander away from the computer and recover from that one.
All right.
So the next paragraph, what she has said there, in the context of the whole article, is, yes, I know men can be victimized by women, and I know that society and the law are structured to make it easy for women to victimize men, and I know that there are women who take advantage of that, but shame on you for talking about it. Some leading men's rights websites, such as A Voice for Men, she says, offer a steady diet of vulgar women bashing that discredits any valid points they make. At first glance...
yeah.
Now, yeah, I want to read what... Oh, God. You gotta stop talking because every fucking time I move... Okay, now we've got really tiny text, so just a second while I do this manually. And go back to the beginning. Like, you have to put 2 fingers on the pad to use it this way. And then, if you move your fingers and they're not in perfect unity, they squeeze together and the text shrinks. Demonization of the other sex discredits any points they make. So at first glance, the statement looks like an attack only on A Voice for Men. And it did. A lot of people took it that way. A lot of people looked at this and said, well, she's just pointing out that the guys at A Voice for Men are misogynistic. We can just throw them under the bus and Kathy Young will still love us. You know, well, no. That's not the way it is. It isn't just an attack on A Voice for Men. And I pointed that out in the next paragraph. Though the sentence mentions the site, it's an inclusive statement, referencing leading websites. Now, Alison has gone through and mentioned several of them in different shows. This is not a new movement. People who run into the movement and have never seen it before, and the first thing they see is A Voice for Men, they think it's the only prominent men's issues website because it gets a lot. It gets a lot of attention and it takes the most punches. And it takes the most punches because, honestly, it's the most blunt in talking about men's issues anymore. There were other sites that were much more blunt that are gone. But the fact is, women are used to having their sensibilities coddled. So when they run into somebody who says, you're responsible for the consequences of your behavior, and they've never been told that before, or they've never had to live up to that before, it's like getting splashed with an entire bathtub full of cold water. They don't like that. So they run into a Voice for Men, and they think it's the leading website. And you got National Coalition for Men, you've got Men's Web, you've got Reddit's Men's Rights subreddit, you've got all these various different sites out there. And I'm not going to go on and name all of them, but all of them are under attack. It's an attack not only on this site, but on every site where men's rights advocates dare to gather. It's an attack on all of us. Every men's rights advocate who has the nerve to speak about men's issues. It also isn't an honest statement. Okay, this is getting old. I'm like not even touching the screen. You guys can all see this happening too, right? Like, it's not just
Yes.
me. I'm not just imagining that the text is getting smaller.
Oh man, you need to go into that trackpad settings real bad.
Apparently. Okay, so
Do you,
among the issues, where is it? Discussion on leading men's rights websites centers on highlighting the issues men face, the causes of those issues, and changes in law and policy and social norms which would be necessary to fix those issues. Among the issues noted in Young's article, many involve ways in which women benefit from laws that discriminate against men, and as she noted, feminists have opposed men's efforts to remedy that. Discussing those issues is naturally going to include pointing out the abuse itself, which, in turn, means pointing the finger at its female perpetrators and their feminist defenders. It will also naturally include challenging popular opinion on aspects of those issues, and challenging popular opinion on related women's issues. In labeling such discussion a steady diet of vulgar woman bashing, Young is really saying two things. First, that women must be exempt from criticism, even when discussing issues that are a result of female dysfunction. And second, that feminist ownership of women's issues must not be challenged by alternative viewpoints. This is simultaneously an incredibly tight control to place on gender issues discussion, and a leash that can be placed on those unruly female MHRAs who fail to toe the feminist line. Between the line, she's saying a third thing that most people won't pick up. The same thing feminists everywhere say between the lines when they invade men's issues forums with the "can't we all just get along" argument. To pick up on it, you have to realize that criticism of feminism and female dysfunction can't be vulgar women bashing, unless one assumes that all women are feminist and all women are dysfunctional. MHRAs cannot discuss women. Women are the proprietary territory of feminist writers. Discussion on women's behavior and women's issues must always be shaped by feminist ideology, or anything you say will be considered misogyny. The sentiment goes beyond male discussion. It's not just a statement of ownership of the topic, women. It's ownership of women. It's also the use of castigation of men's speech to shame women who support the MHRM. And then I'll go on after discussion of that, because we have, I know Karen's been trying to jump in.
No. I'm just looking at the super chats that have built up, and I think we should read some of them out.
We have gotten quite an impressive list.
Yeah, and some of them I'm quite like that. The all caps long sausage for Alison from Frank to Mayo. I really wanted to read that out. Long, Alison, are you listening? Long sausage for Alison. And now he just added, "I must be a misogynist." No,
a misogynist.
You're only a misogynist for Alison, apparently. So, what you said, Frank, what you said scared her away. She's gone. I don't think she's coming back.
Just couldn't handle the length. Couldn't handle the length.
Yeah, I'm actually sort of trying to be scarce because I don't want this sausage to get any longer. And I'm also having an argument.
The sausage is going to get longer.
I want the sausage to be spicier. This sausage is too bland.
I want the sausage to be gamier.
I want this freaking sausage to be done. All right? I want it to be tied off and cut. And
Alison likes her sausage hot. All right. Duck, formerly known as Censor, started us off today at 8:03 p.m. actually, because we were late, with a $5 super chat that said 2D girls are greater than 3D girls. And I don't know. I don't really.
Well, that depends. That depends. Do the 2D girls have like a nagging algorithm? Because if they do, then they'd be equally as bad as the 3D girls.
There you go. I mean, I don't really think there's a lot of depth to enough 3D girls to judge. So, that said, that one's going to be cherry picked. Haha. That one's going to be quote mined. Hokibukisa gave us US $10 and said, Honey Badger don't give a S dot. Honey Badger don't give a F exclamation point. They just takes what they wants. And
there were some asterisks in there,
face.
but Discord does tend to mess those up. So.
I know.
I had a delicious dinner consisting of bee larvae today.
Okay.
Bee larvae, and also cobra head. So
there we go.
Wow.
Yeah.
Frenchinator 2 gave us US $5 and said Karen should not talk bad about the alpha chat male.
The alpha chat male. See now the Frenchinator 2 has my dog howling. Right?
Pola to the max. It says.
The alpha chad male. Yeah, the alpha chad male can lick my butthole. And that's all I have to say about that. There you go.
Barnabas Seaworth gave us US $10 and said, Sup, Badgers? I just saw a video from this Nightmare Fuel guy, and he accused you guys of being Islam apologists for some stupid reason. Guy sounds like a complete dumbass. And I just wanted to read that, even though it's been under discussion.
Shush. I'm going to speak to that.
Okay.
Because it's relevant to what I've been saying here and what I've said in the chat. Because there's an individual who is a veteran who says that he was in the Middle East, and he did various things combating what he considered to be misogyny and violence there. And thank you for your service, by the way, Mr. Lint Monkey. However, I think you're wrong about one thing. Because as me and Karen were talking... Oh shit, Audacity, just stop! Damn it!
It's okay,
oh, no.
We lost mine when my computer froze, so...
But that means we lost all the banter that we were having. Doesn't worry. Okay, I'm going to continue. We just had another technical difficulty. Sorry about that. So the reason why I'm saying that you're wrong is this. As Karen was pointing out, Muslim women have more rights than Victorian women had, which means that our great-great-great-great-great-grandfathers were worse than Muslim men are now. Here's the problem with...
I don't even think you need that many greats.
Okay, well, anyway, so however many greats are needed there, whatever the precise amount of greats are, Muslim men are better than our great-great-great whatever grandfathers were. When you accept that logic, you accept that feminism had to intervene to make men become human beings. What you're saying is that feminism is responsible for every part of you that is moral and just, Mr. Mentulint. You're saying that feminism made you a man that is honorable and cares about women. That's what you're saying. That's what you're conceding to feminism. And if you concede that to feminism, shut up, Karen. If you concede that to feminism, prepare to be ruled by feminism. Because you just decided that the only thing that makes you human, your soul, is feminism as a man.
You know, okay, what I want to say here, okay, because the Married Women's Property Act was sort of instigated by an incident in London where a married woman was robbed and her purse was stolen, and her purse contained something like 20 pounds of cash, right? And she was shocked and horrified. This is a middle-aged married woman. Shocked and horrified to discover that on all of the police documents and the judicial documents and all of this relating to the robbery, that the 20 pounds that were stolen from her were described as her husband's money and not hers. She had no idea that she was existing under a legal handicap in which none of the money she thought was hers was actually hers. None of the property she thought was hers was actually hers. It all belonged to her husband. She had no idea. There are cases going back in the not the common law courts, but the courts of equity and ecclesiastical courts in the UK, all the way back to the 1600s, that indicate that women were laboring under the complete misconception that the property that they brought into the marriage no longer belonged to them, because it never came up. It was not something that impacted their lives on a daily basis. It impacted them if their husband was a deadbeat and abandoned them. It impacted them if they were robbed. Okay. It impacted them if they disagreed with the way their husband administered the family property. Those were the only, the benefits of the body of laws governing property within marriage, which would be called coverture, right? The responsibilities and obligations between husbands and wives. That body of laws gave them something called the law of agency, which was something they exercised on a daily basis. Every time they went into a store and selected a whole bunch of stuff and said, "Bill my husband," put it on his credit, right? They were exercising an absolute right that they had in law, that he would have to actually go from one merchant to the other and say, if she was overspending and getting the family into debt, right, being irresponsible, he would have to go from merchant to merchant to merchant and say, "Don't sell stuff to my wife." He couldn't just put out a notice on a bulletin board saying, "I will no longer be responsible for this woman's purchases," or anything like that. No, he had to go to every single individual merchant in the area and say, "Do not sell shit to my wife on my credit because I won't be responsible for it." Right? That's what he had to do to not be liable for debts that she racked up in his name. So, I mean, like, you're looking at, they understood the benefits of coverture absolutely intimately because they lived them every day of their lives. The handicaps of coverture occurred once, twice in a lifetime, maybe.
And that is how, in society, the layman ends up with laws like we're dealing with now, where we were talking about prior to the show, we were talking in chat about how, you know, if you go out to a deli and you buy a bologna sandwich, the NSA probably knows about it if you're in the United States. I mean, it's that. If you call your mom on the phone and talk about what you're going to do for the family Christmas party or the family 4th of July party, the NSA has the capacity to know about that too. And we've gotten to this point because people pay attention to the benefits of the laws that govern us, but very rarely consider the drawbacks. And so this is an ongoing thing. It's been something that's a problem with humanity for as long as we've had laws, as long as we've had government, as long as we've had any of these things, that we get lazy and we accept drawbacks that we won't like if we actually have to deal with them in order to get benefits that we get every day. And the benefit we get from the NSA is the illusion of a more secure life than we actually have. And that's starting to disappear now because we're starting to see death and destruction that we didn't think would happen. That's the same thing that happened with women when that led to feminism.
It wasn't the illusion.
It wasn't the illusion with women, but in a way it was. In a way it was. Because when those drawbacks started to hit, when women started to want to advance their gender role, those drawbacks were a wall between them and that advancement. And the benefits,
that's true.
The benefits turned out to be, even though there was a reality to those benefits, and there's a reality to the benefit of security that we have too.
Okay, but here's the thing. But Hannah, here's the thing. Those drawbacks began to be removed in 1835 or something like that.
Right.
They were completely removed in 1865 or 1867 in the UK. Right. But all of the benefits remained. They still had the law of agency. They still had an entitlement to be financially supported by their husband. They still retained the entitlement for their husband to pay the taxes on their income and property.
That still hasn't changed. They still retain the right, if they get a divorce, to demand that their husband continue to support them in the style to which they were accustomed. That is what gets me called an Islam apologist. When I talk about women under Islamic law are trying to advance their gender role right now. And not all of them. There are some of them that are fighting tooth and nail not to, just like when women in the West fought to change their gender role. There were women fighting tooth and nail not to, and there were women fighting tooth and nail to change in other directions than the directions feminists fought to change. And what we're seeing now is feminists invading the Middle Eastern fight to change women's gender roles with their same ideology and beliefs. And the reason I get called... Karen, stop. The reason I get called an Islam apologist is for pointing out that it will be infinitely more damaging there if they introduce the feminist brand of gynocentrism into that society on top of the Middle Eastern brand of gynocentrism than it was here. And you see how it is here. How many wars is the United States involved in? And that's a country that's supposed to be dedicated to peace. What do you think will happen if the feminist brand of gynocentrism gets introduced into the Middle East, where there is not an overt dedication covered by, all kinds of pretty talk? They just declare war and go for it.
Well, with me, and I brought this up when I went on Dave Rubin, that stop, please, all of you liberalists or liberalismists or whatever, right? The classical liberals, right? Please stop telling feminists to go to the Middle East, because they're gonna fuck it up. Because they have never ever looked at the other side of the story. They have never looked at the reciprocal obligation of men to women. They've only looked and balked and been offended by the fact that women are obligated to men in certain ways. And they've never ever taken into account the ways that men are obligated to women. And so what you're gonna have is a situation like we had between the 1830s and probably the 1960s or 70s in the West, where you literally did have a legal obligation on men to financially support their wives. A woman could apply for alimony while still married if she was unsatisfied with how her husband was supporting her. That was something a woman could do. You literally had this situation where women had a set of entitlements, but no reciprocal obligations. And every single obligation of women in marriage, and so it just has been wiped off the board, including the obligation for a man to have a sex life, right? Nobody gets married thinking, I hope I never have sex ever again, right? But for a lot of men, that's their reality. And now the law is such that they have no entitlement to have a sex life within marriage, whether that's the entitlement to have this semi-quasi-regular sex with their wife, or whether that's the entitlement to be able to step outside the marriage. All of those options are bad, they're wrong, they're illegal, they're punishable. And then you have this situation where when the marriage ends for whatever reason, even or no reason at all, he still pays for her. It's like she's still married, but there's nobody sucking his dick or cleaning his house.
Yeah. But we're off on a tangent again. The main thing I wanted to point out...
Which I said is exactly what would happen when we took back Super Chat.
The main thing I wanted to point out with respect to this Super Chat, though, is, we all have different reasons why we get called that. And a lot of it goes right back to the inability of largely women, but even men with a gynocentric perspective, the inability to connect responsibility for the consequences of the way in which gynocentrism as a mechanism is wielded by a society and by segments of a society, that is in general what leads to us getting called Islam apologists. And that inability is compounded by the fact that in the West we have othered almost all Islam, if not all Islam, because of the conflicts between terrorist factions within the Muslim world. And it's kind of hard to call it a community with it being a seventh or an eighth of the world population. But within the Muslim world, there are obviously we know there are terrorist factions, and it seems to be that gets generalized to the entire population, even though they victimize other areas of the Muslim population. And we get called Islam apologists for not othering them. That, in and of itself, is a function of gynocentrism, as Alison explained earlier. So that's kind of what we're dealing with in terms of we're going to see that, and it's not going to change. And it's not necessarily evil or wrong or hateful or bad or an attack for people to do that. Oh, for crying out loud. My PC wants to do everything but run this broadcast. But in any case, it is something to counter, and it is something to talk about, and it's not... it's going to happen. That's just it. So don't freak out when you see it. Take what people say into consideration, and look for logic flaws like you would with any other argument. Look for shaming language and tone policing and the various things that we've talked about, and apply the various tools that we've brought up to that discussion, the same as you would any other discussion. It's very hard to do that with stuff that we get emotional over, but do it anyway, because you're Honey Badger, and that's what we do. Going on, we have Anthony Luden gave us US $10 and said, Super Chat for Hannah's computer. My computer is chatty enough. We have Sojourn 5 gave us US $5. I didn't say anything. Then we have Frank Tomeo gave us $2 Canadian and said, Windows 7! Which I would love to have on this computer, but it doesn't let you regress from... It came with 10. I'm stuck with 10. 10 sucks. They do this like every so often. They'll come out with a really great version, as far as you can come out with a really great version of Windows, and they're like, okay, so we have to just absolutely fuck up the next 4 versions and then make them mandatory, and then we have to set it up so that everybody has to use the absolute most fucked up of all of the versions of Windows so far before we come out with another good one. And at that point, we'll stop supporting the old one, because we're assholes. So I should identify with them, but instead I just hate their computers. Or not the computers, but the desktop operating system. Then we have, let's see, Frank Tomeo also gave us $2 Canadian and said, I love Alison's sausage talk. French Honey Badger gave us US $5 and said, I have 25% off for you, Hannah. Oh, I would love that. Then, let's see, I gotta skip down. We've got a lot of text in between. Anthony Luden gave us US $2 and said, I only come here for the obscenely long sausage. Frenchinator 2 gave us US $2 and said, Alison, you were rude, right? Karen. Let's see. Frenchinator 2 gave us US $2 and said, stop being a cu.nt, Karen. So, I guess
I will not. I will not.
Rude.
I will not stop being a cunt.
I'm assuming this next one is Japanese? Hokibukisa gave us US $5 and said, Ali-sama, good grief, Omi wa mu sendiru, and I probably butchered the fuck out of that, but Frank Tomeo gave us Canadian $2.
I just want to say you didn't butcher it as bad as Alison would have.
Okay. Well, at first I looked at it and you know what I thought of? This is really awful, but there was a dumb joke when I was a kid. We'd go around other kids at the park and offer to teach them to speak a foreign language and then give them a set of syllables to say, and they would repeat each, part of the set individually. So you'd say, okay, say oa, and then they would say oa, say tanis, and then they would say tanis, and then say siam, and they would say siam, and then you say, now say it all together, and they would say oa tanasiam, and you'd laugh at them. So I'm like, all right, is this one of those? But it's not.
So that's not quite like the way we used to teach Spanish in when I was a kid, which was like, okay, so somebody's going to Mexico or whatever, they need to, here's a helpful phrase if you need to know where the bus stop is. Just go up to the nearest guy and ask, "Tu madre es una puta?"
Oh God, we're gonna get in trouble now. You can't just because it's in another language doesn't mean that you can say it on YouTube when we're speaking English. They're still gonna pick that up.
Oh, whatever. My accent is so bad they couldn't pause.
Yes, they will.
Okay.
Yes, they will.
Can we just not have a 4-hour sausage?
Yeah, well,
because this is how you get a 4-hour sausage.
No more insults in foreign language. We're at Super Chat. Xeranx gave us US $2 and said, "Rudest thing you've ever said, Hannah, please." No, I am not. I am not saying that on the air. We'll lose our YouTube channel forever.
She's probably gonna say it to Alison after we close the show.
No.
Because Alison wants to spoil everybody's fun. She's such a killjoy.
No.
She's a horrible human being.
No, I'm not going to tell you the rudest thing I ever said to anybody, but I will tell you I have become very good at disguising rudeness as politeness, and I can offer you for my refusal to tell you the rudest thing I ever said. I can offer you my most sincere and unfelt apologies. Yeah, no, I don't do that. I'm not going to repeat it. I'm not going to give you the circumstances, and it's just not going to happen, so give it up. But next we have Jonathan Rossler, who gave us US $2 and said, Windows 10 cannot handle all of the condensed misogyny. Does condensed misogyny come in cans?
Yeah,
interesting fudge with that.
It's in the baking section next to the evaporated misogyny.
I see. Frank DeMeo gave us $2 Canadian and says, Mr. Monkey Lint has great fun facts. I have no idea. I was not reading. Frenchinator 2 gave us US $5 and says, kill the V. This is for seeing a naked woman. Yep. Barnabas Seaworth gave us US $5 and says, feminists only allow men to express their emotions in the way they want them to. For example, the mask you live in. Yeah, you're supposed to cry when bad things happen to women. That's what feminists want. Let's see. We have Frenchinator 2.
Everybody wants.
Yeah. Frenchinator 2 gave us US $2 and says, Karen, are you getting more dogs?
No. No more dogs for you, Karen.
She's not allowed.
Actually, my boyfriend was suggesting that maybe we get our dog, who is neurotic and has abandonment issues and stuff, a dog companion. So he actually suggested that we get a second dog to make a positive impact on the mental health, long-term mental health of this dog. So maybe.
It can work if your dog is not old yet. It can even work if your dog is old. Do not try this with cats. Xeranx gave us...
Well, Alison has several.
I know.
Alison has a whole bunch of cats, but...
And they all kill each other?
Yeah. Cats don't get along as well as dogs do in that circumstance, at least in my experience, especially if one of them's been living apart from the other cats for a long period of time and then gets moved in with them. They don't get along very well for quite a while.
Well, our dog is so, she is aggressively sociable.
Oh.
Like retardedly aggressively sociable. Like she literally wants to meet every other dog, but then she's so happy to see them and she freaks out and gets so excitable that the other dogs are like, I'm just going to back away with my hands where she can see them. This chick is crazy. Right?
She's one of those.
Yeah, and so it's like they don't want anything to do with her necessarily because she just is like so effusive and so excited to see another dog. Oh my God. And so they just back away slowly and don't want anything to do with her. But if we had an actual other dog that was like a prisoner in this house with her, that dog would have to learn how to tolerate her, and then maybe she might calm down. I don't know.
Get her a
we'll
beagle.
Figure it out.
Get her a beagle, because then we can hear the beagle bay on the stream.
Oh man, this dog is the most vocal dog.
On a shelf.
This dog is the most vocal dog I have ever had. Like she howls along with the fire truck sirens.
Every time you hear her say dog, I can hear her in the background going.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, she when we're all talking in the living room, she walks around and like makes Chewbacca noises. Right? Wants to be in on the conversation. And when the birds are singing outside, there's birds singing outside, and they go chirp, 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 and then she goes woo, 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 woo.
Oh,
and then they go chirp, 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 and she goes woo, 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 woo.
It's like my grandpa's old hunting beagle. He, hunting beagles, they got to bay when they tree anything, right? And so my grandfather's hunting beagle would be outside, and he'd be tied, and the squirrels would be outside running around, because that's what they do. And one of them would go up a tree, and the beagle would announce it to the entire neighborhood. Woo! Woo! And my grandfather would have to come out and quiet him down. No, you haven't treed the squirrel. The squirrel ran up the tree because that's what squirrels do. And that was it. But, yeah, this sounds like...
Well, this dog, like any noise... Any noise, she wants to mimic it. Anybody talking, she wants to be part of the conversation. She growls, like, all the time. She wanders around the house growling, wagging her tail and growling, no snarling, nothing. It's just her trying to talk.
You're seriously, if you got to get another dog now so we can hear it. In any case, on to the next chat. Xeranx gave us US $5 and said, I'm glad you referenced, whatever it is you referenced. Oguki? I don't know how that. What it's spelled?
Praise Martin Oguiki. Praise Martin.
Oh, it's actually spelled like it sounds. That's unusual. Okay. Oguiki, Karen. He's from Nigeria. His story doesn't get any coverage, and I've been mentioning him constantly.
Yeah, no, and you should because he's one of those beautiful examples of the typical man who was falsely accused, who is just like, I don't hold any ill will toward her. I just want to forgive and forget, let bygones be bygones, get on with my life, right? Which is, I mean, like, it's admirable in its way, but it's not going to get anything accomplished, right? But when you actually take this guy in the position that he was in and how his life was affected, and then he says, I don't harbor any bad feelings toward this woman who ruined my life, essentially. Yeah. And I don't want to see her punished. That really speaks to that certain part of sort of traditional masculinity that really wants to let women off the hook. And I think that when you're living in a system, dog, shut up. When you're living in a system where everybody wants to see the absolute worst in men, particularly the absolute worst in terms of how they affect women, and then you see a guy like that who's been through that say something like that. No, I don't hold any grudges. I just want to get on with my life, and she can get on with hers, and I forgive her, right? That speaks to a part of masculinity that it's no longer even permissible to say that is part of masculinity, right? That like I have said over and over again over the last month or two on radio shows, in terms of we used to look there's a thing called the masculine conformity to masculinity inventory, And they've changed over the years since 1979 or something, when they first started being used in research. They've changed. The traits, the masculine norms that men are required to conform to have changed over time. And they've become increasingly more and more negative, and all of the positive aspects of, you know, what you would call masculine virtues have been removed from the conformity to masculinity inventories that researchers use. So in the social sciences, so essentially it's almost like we're not allowed to even say there is such a thing as a masculine virtue, or masculine selflessness, or masculine self-sacrifice, or masculine forgiveness, or masculine mercy, right? You're not allowed to even acknowledge that that is a component of masculinity. But when you have this highly masculine, high testosterone football player, you know, saying, I just want to let it go. That's really, and that's probably why his case didn't get a whole lot of traction in the mainstream, is because he was just like, I don't know why she did it. Maybe she had her reasons. I forgive her. And I just want us both to be okay. Right? That's literally what he said. So.
Okay, well, we're going to go on with the next super chat. We've still got several super chats and more of the article. So I'm going to call it now, because it is 20 after 10. I think that after the super chats, I'm going to look. I think we may have to cut the sausage after the super chats. Well, no, the rest of the article's not all that long. But we may want to discuss it further.
Just read the article.
I think once, well, we're going to read this. Do you want me to finish reading the article after the super chats?
Yes, read the super chats and do not let people comment on them.
Okay, so this next one actually calls for Karen commenting, but I looked at it and there is no way we can fit a comment on this into a show. So Karen, you're going to have to direct him to your videos. But this is Peter, I believe this is Nietre. It gave us US $10 and says, Karen, can you go over the 3 waves of feminism, the goals and results? See why I said you can't fit that into my show.
I can do that. I can do that in less than a minute.
We're not going to take a minute.
No, I can do that. I can do that in less than a minute. First wave feminism, giving women men's rights without men's responsibility. Second wave feminism, getting rid of women's responsibilities. Third wave feminism, putting more responsibility on men. Done.
All right.
Okay.
And the video that you're looking for is my response to male chauvinist.
Your response to male chauvinist pig? Is that what you said?
Yes, my response to male chauvinist pig. That's where I put it.
Okay. For some reason, the last syllable of everything that you're saying is cutting off. I don't know if you're turning away from a microphone or something else is going on, but
I probably muted my mic before it completely registered. But
okay.
But yeah, my response to male chauvinist pig has that graphic with those criteria in it.
Alrighty. Frenchinator 2 gave us US $5 and says the word race is a social construct, not the idea the race expresses, because shifting the expression of ideas is fun. And that's true. And then Frank Tomeo gave us $2 Canadian and says, long, 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 long sausage for Alison. Frank Tomeo then gave us $2 more Canadian and said, I must be a misogynist. We're at the end, I think, here. Barnabas Seaworth gave us US $5 and said, feminists care more about fictional female characters than actual real women. And that's also true. In fact, regressives care more about fictional salad than actual real women. Hokibukisa gave us US $5 and said, what about Rome, though? And we're not going to answer that. Yeah, sorry.
I see your bait, and I move along, sir.
The DCV Titan gave us Canadian $2 and said, oh, like, yes, I am Sofa King Wee Todd Dead. Which comes out to, I am so fucking retarded.
So fucking retarded.
Yeah, we did that one too. We did hold your tongue and say, all I want is a pirate ship, and all that stuff. Or Apple, hold your tongue and say Apple. Frank Tomeo gave us $2 Canadian and said, huge shout out to the chat. Frenchinator 2 gave us US $2 and said, my God, dogs! Karen in 6 months.
All right. Yeah, no. I'm just saying my boyfriend suggested it, but that doesn't mean it's going to happen. I am even leery of idea of it. And he'll probably change his mind because he vacillates between calling the dog baby and making her sit with him snuggling. He calls it like a dooman.
Well, vacillating in public is obscene.
Like a dog / human. He makes her sit next to him in the chair.
Which is adorable.
I thought we weren't responding to the super chats.
Frank Tomeo gave us $2 Canadian and said, liberals are out of Ontario. Well, that depends.
Out in Ontario.
Out in Ontario. Okay.
That's some good news.
Okay, yeah, like Rob Ford's brother. Rob Ford's brother is running for the Conservatives. And no, this is big news for Canada.
Yes, it's okay. It's huge news.
Rob Ford was Toronto's.
I sense another half hour of sausage.
Oh my God, he's Toronto's crack-smoking mayor. Okay,
oh,
he was accused of propositioning a woman, telling her by a fellow city councilor. Right? She said she went out in public and said he asked me if he could lick my pussy. Right? And then, so he was asked about that by the press, and he said, why would I want that? I got plenty to eat at home.
Oh, jeez, Pete.
Okay, so, and the guy was, way popular among the voters. It was he had a higher popularity rating than Obama did, right? Okay, among the voters. So approval rating. So it was and now his brother, he's died. Rob Ford has died. His brother Doug Ford is running for the Conservative Party as the leader in the Ontario provincial race against hardcore radical lesbian separatist feminist Kathleen Wynne.
Oh, thank God that person didn't get in.
Well, no, she's been in for a while. She's been in for a while. She's the one who allocated $40 million over 3 years to raise awareness of a little-known issue called domestic violence against women.
Oh my God! My ass.
Oh my God!
$40 million of taxpayer money to make public service announcements, right? Alerting people to the fact that men sometimes beat their wives.
Yeah. I mean, when will people be aware of this? This is just.
I don't even know, Alison.
When will people be aware that men beat women, or some men beat women, and some men rape women? I mean, these are things that just need more awareness because people just don't realize it. Okay, and they don't realize that the sausage is too long. Get back to the
Sometime in the distant future, hundreds of years from now, archaeologists are going to find all of these things, and they're going to think,
and they're going to go, "Oh my God, these people didn't realize it wasn't okay to beat your wife."
They're going to
what the fuck was wrong with those guys?
Well, no, they're going to find them, and then they're going to find all of this the street signs and stuff for things like curves in the road ahead and snow. That the road is slippery when wet, that the bridge ices earlier than the road does, and things like that. And they're going to be like, this was back when people were idiots. So that said, we can go on.
Please, God,
as I pointed out in the article. As I pointed out in the article.
Oh my God.
Okay, Alice, you're making this take longer now.
I know there's another super chat. And
you're adding to the sausage, Alison.
Hokey Bakusa.
Further super chats will not be read until after the article is over.
And the stream is offline.
But Rome, though!
The stream is offline. The stream is offline.
No, it's not. It's not offline.
No, it's back online. Okay.
I was gonna say it's not offline. It's been showing steady on my screen the entire time. So, Kathy Young's article. We had talked about the part where I pointed out she's basically saying MHRAs cannot discuss women. And her article is the use of castigation of men's speech to shame women who support the MHRM. This can further be seen in Young's subtle claim that the MHRM is not a gender equality movement. Perhaps what the 21st century needs, she says, is not a women's movement, which was once essential to secure basic rights. No, it wasn't. Or a men's movement, but a gender equality movement. That paragraph isn't the invitation to inclusion that it is intended to appear to be. It's shut the fuck up, MHRAs. Strip off the nice intro, read that paragraph by itself, and what you have left is the same thing we see in this type of argument all the time. Her point isn't we should be working together, but I want to convince you the MHRM has no legitimacy as a standalone movement. A woman's movement was once essential to secure basic rights, but when men's basic rights have been attacked and compromised, a men's movement is not needed to remedy that. Feminism has gone too far, as she pointed out in an earlier paragraph, but apparently a men's movement isn't needed to remedy that either. Contrary to Young's insinuation, it can be acknowledged that feminism is not a gender equality movement, because there are demonstrable examples of feminist efforts to create or maintain discrimination against men and boys in law and policy and social conditions. That's not gender equality advocacy. What Young fails to understand is that the MHRM is a gender equality movement. The movement doesn't attack women or women's rights, but instead treats women with a respect that feminism has tried to kill. The application of standards. We don't have to be identical to men to be equally valued, and we don't have to damsel to get them to listen to our opinions, even those with which they disagree. But we do have to live up to that same expectation of character that men are accustomed to being expected to display. Feminism is degrading. Feminist advocacy strives to normalize and excuse female dysfunction and the expectation of special treatment. Feminist theory imposes helplessness on women to support an agenda. Feminist leadership uses the concept of total female vulnerability for political fodder, and in doing so, unnecessarily pits us against men. That is not empowering. It's disturbing and creepy. Feminists reserve a special hatred for female MHRAs because we refuse their exploitative advances. That reduces the size of their stable of proxy victims to whore out for public sympathy in 3 ways. We deny them the ability to use us directly. We show how dishonest they are in imposing perpetual victimhood on others. We call them out on it when they do that. That kills their monopoly on the female end of gender issues, of the gender issues dialogue. A tool they've been using to wrangle funds and political power for decades. When we buck the self-perceived authority of feminist leadership, we threaten their income and status. Bad, honey badgers. No snake guts for you. The hidden message for female MHRAs in the can't we all just get along argument is, get your ass back in line, bitches. How dare you? How dare you side with the enemy? How dare you call the enemy a human rights movement? How dare you contradict your feminist overlords? Don't you realize if you do that, we'll make you look mean and ugly and nobody will like you? What women like Kathy Young don't understand is that this particular method of attack, the can't we all just get along tone argument, does not work on either the men or the women of the MHRM. You're not going to shut men up by castigating them over the tone of their speech. You're not going to shut female MHRAs up by treating the movement as an outrage. We are not withering violets, afraid that our words won't be accepted, our opinions not liked, and our methods not approved. We're not here for a popularity contest. We're here to draw attention to issues people want to ignore. We're here because we're not your political property. We're here because fuck perpetual victimhood. We're here because feminism hurts women too. We're here because men's rights are human rights. Sincerely, the Honey Badger Brigade. I sent a call out on a Voice for Men for other women to sign on to this. Gave them about 2 weeks, maybe a little more. All the red links or red names here are links to various blogs and everything. If it's in black, there's no blog to link to, or at least there wasn't when the article was written. But we got a lot. At the time, I didn't even realize how many women were involved in the movement. And so I was quite pleased and proud to see that women were willing to step up and put their names on this. And I'm imagining this is probably what there's been a few parties claiming to have started the Honey Badger Brigade besides us. None of the women on this list are among them. But I imagine that this is what was meant when that was said. Now,
well,
I'm Della Burton. I wrote this article. Della Burton was my name at that time, not my real name, but my given name on Voice for Men, and it was the name I was acting under because I was under threat of false reporting to Child Protective Services by not just a woman, but a women's organization helping her attack one of my friends with vexatious litigation. And the reason they were threatening was because I was a witness on his side. That is why I say fuck feminism. That is why I say fuck your victim narrative. Because I have seen it used as a weapon. I have had it used as a weapon against me. And I know how wrong it is.
Yeah, no, and I would actually say, you know, too, like I've gotten actually a fair number of women who have contacted me saying, thank goodness you're doing this, and I'd like to help and stuff like that, right? And a lot of people don't know exactly how they can contribute, but you know, essentially anything that you can do, including just writing to me and saying, you know, thank you for what you do, that's a help. But, you know, in terms of what you were saying about, you know, why you were using a pseudonym, and what the situation was around that, you know, like I got a call on a Sunday morning out of the blue from a number that I didn't recognize. It was from Saskatchewan, so I thought it was Alison. I just automatically assumed. And so I picked up, and it was a frantic man whose brother, who lived in northern Alberta, was in jail. And here's how the situation, here's how the thing went, was that his brother had been married to a woman. He was still married to this woman. They had 2 small kids, one right after the other kind of thing. And she had always had problems with drugs and addiction issues. And one day when their kids were still small, she picked up and left, and she didn't tell them where she was going, left no forwarding contact information, nothing. She just abandoned the family. So for about 2 years, he just got on with it and worked and raised his 2 kids and was the only parent and coped. And then one night, the previous week, before I got this phone call, she arrives at his door and says, you know, I'd like to reconcile. I'd like to get back together. And of course, he's like, yeah, I don't think so. But then she says, well, can I sleep on the couch? Right? I don't have anywhere to go, and I don't have any money. And, you know, I'd really love to be able to see the kids in the morning. Can I sleep on the couch? And he was like, okay, well, you know, it's their mother, you know, and so, okay, let her sleep on the couch. He wakes up in the morning at about 6, and his kids and the wife are gone, and nothing, no note or anything saying where they went. And so he phones the police. They tell him to come to the police station. So he gets to the police station and spends a couple of hours filling out a police report. And then he goes back home Nobody at the police station said, we've located your wife and kids. They just took his statement, and he goes back home and he's immediately arrested. Now, why was he arrested? Because she abducted the children from the home in the middle of the night, went and sought refuge at a battered women's shelter about 1.5 blocks away from the house, right? And then that battered women's shelter, the staff there, helped her apply for a temporary order of protection at the courthouse. The very first thing in the morning, nobody notified this man that there was a restraining order in place, indicating that he could not be within 500 meters of his wife or his kids. And so when he went back to his home, which was well within 0.5 kilometer of this battered women's shelter, he was arrested on the spot for violating a order of protection that he had no idea existed. And so his brother, okay, so he phones his brother going, what do I do? And his brother phones me, not a lawyer, not a prominently situated freaking advocacy group. No, not a crisis center. He phones me on a Sunday because I'm the first person he thinks of who's actually going to be willing to help him. And that is a very freaking sad thing. It's a really fucking sad thing that I'm the first person that pops into somebody's head when they're in a situation like this and they need help.
Hey, what's with the
I didn't think that was going to be the last thing she said, so I had turned my back on the computer for a minute, and then when I turned around, I
was trying to keep it short.
I know. Well, no, Karen, you don't keep things short. That's not the way you work.
But I was trying to. You did all right.
You did all right. That was an important story, and that's an important aspect of what we deal with. The fact that, you know, they're either in a lot of men's situations, there either are no resources, or they don't know what they are, and it is. Like, I've been contacted. Nobody's contacted me by phone like that. But I've been contacted on Reddit, and I've been contacted on Twitter, and ended up having to give advice because they didn't have anybody else to turn to. And I've been contacted on Reddit by the ex-wife of somebody who I helped in private messages on Reddit. Or rather, the supposed sister of the ex-wife, you know, that didn't admit that it was actually the ex-wife having a temper tantrum. So I know the effects of the help that I gave because she was very angry about it. So I mean, it is a thing. We do get contacted, and it's simultaneously very humbling, a very big responsibility, very it kind of floors you. There's a lot of gravity to that. You want to make sure that you direct people to the resources that can help them the most. You want to make sure that you give people the best advice, and at the same time, there's a little bit of helplessness there because you can't fix their situation. And that's scary, because what if you go to help somebody and you can't fix their situation, and the resources you direct them to aren't good enough, and the advice you have worked in a lot of other situations but doesn't work in theirs. You feel like you failed them, right? And at that situation, at that moment. And I've had people come up against brick wall after brick wall after brick wall when dealing with a court system and an ex-wife, or they were unable to take the advice that I gave because some of it you have to have money, and so on. And it is a rough thing, but yeah, where none of us are all that hard to find. And that's part of the reason why I was anonymous when I first started out, was because I personally am not that hard to find. All of my my residential information and everything. That's all online. You can go to any White Pages website and pay $9, and you can find out every place I've lived, or every place someone with the same name as me has lived in Ohio in the last my entire lifetime. Actually, there's a couple of addresses that weren't mine, but another Hannah Wallen or lived in them. Yeah. So anonymity, as long as that threat existed, was a requirement for me, but it's not something that we can do permanently. That said, I'm gonna read the last.
Breaking news.
Breaking news.
No, breaking news. Breaking news. The Liberals are out in Ontario. It actually is confirmed that Doug Ford's Ontario Conservatives have secured a majority government. They've ousted Kathleen Wynne, the hardcore lesbian separatist feminist, so the outspoken brother of the outspoken crack addict is now in charge of Ontario. Who knows? Maybe he'll be another Ralph Klein.
So. Oh boy. Okay, so
that would be a good thing. However, at the same time, this is basically just pulling over the car and repairing the engine while the people who engage in this kind of social justice warrior tactics, identifying ways that women need to be benefited, and it is women, because women are considered to be the advocates of minority issues. So benefiting the advocates of minority issues is just as good as benefiting minorities. It's the same thing as women and children. It's women appropriating the vulnerability and the need for advocacy for children, except in this case it's minorities. Yeah, widows and orphans. It's all the same thing, but and then at the end of the day, it gives women it either centers women's benefit as the moral good of society, or it centers women as advocating for the moral good of society. Either way, it gives women a lot of, certain very politically minded women who buy into this kind of victimhood tactics, a lot of moral authority. And
I'm actually seeing a huge amount of pushback, right now, in terms of, like, at least on the right, and not the ultra super hard right, but like, AM talk radio right. I'm seeing a huge amount of pushback against all kinds of overreach from and mission creep from the feminist side of the argument and the social justice side of the argument. So maybe we will actually see some kind of actual public conversation about this that can
benefit.
I'm doubtful.
I think this is going to need to be a future show topic, guys. Among other things, I think it will be beneficial to discuss, because we're a movement that right now, the majority of what we've done is help grow the number of people who understand what the issues are, what some of the causes are, and what needs to change and why it needs to change. But
you mean we're grassroots?
Right, we're grassroots. We've gotten to that point, though, where there's enough of a grassroots that we ought to start looking at how can we accomplish that change. Well, it's not going to be formulaic in terms of we do this one thing and it's going to work in the case of all types of people. Because there are people who lean to the left and there are people who lean to the right. There are people who are more authoritarian. There are people who are more libertarian. And all of them are going to have different ways that they're going to view gynocentrism. All of them are going to have different brands of gynocentrism. All of them are going to have different things that they will respond to in terms of why should I care about this? And how should I care about this? And what should be the conclusions that I draw from this information. And so I think a future show, it would be good to have a future show on various political outlooks and where men's human rights and men's human rights activism can fit into those. And believe it or not, there aren't very many facets of the political spectrum men's human rights issues can't fit into. If there were, we'd be wrong. But in any case, I'm going to go on to the last of the super chats. I got to find the last one I read, and that will get us to... Okay, so the last one I read was Liberals are out in Ontario. Hoki Bukise gave us US $5 and says, but Rome, though. And we're not taking the bait.
Okay, I will explain.
This is bait.
Anybody... No, I'm not taking the bait. I'm not going to be excessive. I'm just going to explain what the reference is for people who aren't aware, because sometimes this show can come off as a long series of in-jokes. I am interested in Roman history, and I talk about it a lot. So what Hoki Kiska is doing is trying to bait me into talking about Roman history, which I am resisting. So let us move on to the next super chat.
But Alison, what about the phallic symbols in ancient Rome? What about the actual, edification of male sexuality in ancient Rome?
And
what about these things?
Alison is going to remain silent on all of this. Anthony.
Oh God, Hannah, you killed the conversation with that hideous pun.
That's right. You have been punished for the length of your sausage.
Anthony appreciate Hannah's pun.
US $2 and said, I prefer my sausage with the skin on. Frank Tomeo gave us US $2. Yes.
I absolutely do. I can't see any kind of way that could have been a euphemism for something.
Anything, no. Frank Tomeo gave us $2 Canadian and said, huge shout out to the Honey Badger Brigade, in all caps. And I'm not going to actually shout because that would be really mean since I'm wearing a headset. Frenchinator2 gave us $5 and says, under Islam, the man is punished if the woman does not dress properly. Also, if the woman is not taken care of. Feminism is Islam minus the beating. Well, no,
you don't get the beating, you get jail.
I was going to say, under feminism, the man can get the beating, and all non-feminist women get the beating, and the feminists administer it, and that's where, or the state does, and that's where it goes. We have one last one. I don't think I've missed another one. We have one last one. Frenchinator 2 also gave us US $10 and said a trans woman won a... I think that's position, because I don't think she won a potion. A position in my state. And people on Twitter who are phoning... Huh? Oh, it's definitely a
it's a transformation potion.
Oh, yeah, that makes more sense.
Potion of transformation. There we go.
You are superior to me.
A potion of polymorph self.
There you go.
In my state. And people on Twitter are phoning over the fact that she's trans. Asked what the...
Fawning.
Fawning. Okay,
fawning. I think that is.
Asked what the policy... Asked what the policy that she had. They went,
what's your
OGM?
What's your
this is definitely a phone.
And they're like, oh my God, like, can't you just be happy for a transgender woman?
That's how Obama got elected.
Office.
That's how Obama got elected.
Hope and change, hope and change, hope and change. Oh my God! So what? Can you give me something substantive? Hope and change,
like a normal politician.
Well,
just be like, well, what is her platform? That's
kind of
tokenism.
Honestly, if I was trans and I ran for office, I wouldn't tell people I was trans, because then when I got elected, it would not be about my being trans. It would be about my politics, and that would be a victory.
Frenchinator 2, who is this trans woman and what state did she win in? Because, I don't, there aren't any, this isn't Brianna Wu, is it?
No, it's not Brianna Wu. I know who he's talking about, but I don't know the rest of that information off the top of my head. I don't expect Brianna Wu to win, because her campaign opponent is going to be able to point out to the public of their state that she said you can drop rocks from the moon and they will hit the earth with the power of atomic bombs. And if anybody votes for that in the United States, I'm leaving. I'm just like, God.
Well, okay, because I do know of another politician.
Yes, there was another.
In a trans woman politician in the United States who I had to refer the case to Diana Davison, and Diana Davison is quite cautious about sort of judging for herself from the details of a case. Whether she's super careful about actually saying, yeah, I believe this man has been wrongly accused, right? Like super, super careful about that. and she's meticulous in how she digs into these cases. And there was a trans woman who was a politician in Washington State, I believe, who accused a man of sexual misconduct, and Diana was like, yeah, no, it actually looks like that's like 100% false.
Okay, all right. How does this relate to the trans woman who's a politician?
Well, I want to know if it's that trans woman.
That I don't know.
All right,
that I don't know.
All right.
So, Alison, you had something to
yes, I do.
Read.
I do.
Why
can't we all get along? Why can't we all get along? Why can't we all get along? Why can't we, Karen? Why? Why can't we get along?
Because I hate you, Alison. I hate you and your gaping, stinky hole.
Oh, yeah.
Noise hole. No, the hole on your face, right? That the words come out of.
Well, we all know why we can't get along, but why can't we all get along in society? Well, I'll be frank. The problem is that what we're seeing is a formation of a moral hierarchy, like a theocracy, a literal theocracy with a moral imperative, which is benefit women. That is literally what feminism was founded on. That's the principles feminism was founded on, and it has held consistently true to those principles since the very beginning. And each generation of feminists has its set of women's issues that need to be addressed. Often these include appropriated minority issues as well as the moral imperative has moved to benefit women and minorities. And as each generation of feminists creates this new set of women's issues, it's adopted by the greater society. So now we have, in the 70s, patriarchy theory was considered a radical notion. It was considered something that was on the fringe of feminism. Now we have average women appealing to patriarchy as a way to win arguments, as a trump card in an argument. You know, why did you park the car on top of a fire hydrant? Well, because patriarchy. That's where we're at. So each generation, feminists identify these new moral imperatives, and the next generation, they're adopted by the greater society. And then, interestingly enough, we have, in many cases, like, to some degree, I would say that Christina Hoff Sommers and Kathy Young is in this category. Feminists from previous generation look at the new moral imperatives identified by the new feminists, and they say, hey, wait a second, that might be going a little too far. We didn't go too far, but they might be going too far. Except the entire process of this system requires identifying new ways that women are subjugated so that it can continue to develop moral goodness. And in this system, false accusations are the ultimate heresy because women's victimhood is sacred. It's what creates the means by which men achieve a positive identity in saving women from their victimhood. So we have this entire system where we have these hierophants, these religious authorities identifying new forms of female victimhood that need to be addressed so that men can develop a positive sense of self by being heroes for these women in these new forms of victimhood. And then this machine just chugs over generation after generation after generation, making everything more focused on judging society by how it benefits women and minorities, or how it benefits women as the advocates of minority issues. These people who are driving this process are like any other theocracy. They're only interested in moral imperium. Moral imperium is their right to regard everyone outside of their belief system as debased, as defiled, and as sinners. There's no negotiation with someone who regards themselves as your moral superior, your moral superior. There's only capitulation. So this entire engine that has been created is just going to keep pursuing new ways of saving women from stuff, new ways of casting minority issues as really female issues and saving women from those things, even though they may not even have the issue in the first place. So we're creating solutions that are themselves becoming problems. And this just keeps going because everybody in our society is defined by solving this one problem, by becoming a moral person by solving this one problem. And that is, what is the next way to benefit women more? And we need to identify victimhood in order to be able to do that. And it's just pushing forward and forward and forward into the future. And the rest of society is going to come under this way and can continuously under this way for the very simple reason. This moral framework, judge society or people by how they benefit women, actually gives corporations moral imperium over their customers, their employees. It gives government moral imperium over its citizens, and media moral imperium over its audience. That kind of power is seductive, and there's nothing that can stop the rise of this moral imperium within these structures. It's just going to keep growing and growing and growing. There may be a place for the right to pull this engine over and service it, but it will keep going in the same direction, because the moral imagination of our entire culture is captured by this idea of constantly saving women. And the only way that we can really oppose it is to build a community where it's questioned and where it starts to lose its power. And so I say to you, help us build that community. www.feedthebadger.com. And there you go. That's my shill to you.
And it was a good shill. We have one last super chat. Don't give us any more because I'm not reading it.
Damn you!
After this.
You've got a stealth chat!
Xeranx gave us $2. While Alison was reading and said, Hannah, there's only third world to go to if Wu wins. And damn it, he's right.
No, we could go to the moon. We could go to the moon and try to drop rocks on her.
I'm having enough trouble breathing already.
Drop rocks on her.
Actually, I want to.
But if Wu wins, since there is only third world to go to, if Wu wins, I shall stay and fight. I am convinced Xeranx is right, and I will not leave. And
I'm pulling this out.
I will go. I will literally go to the moon. I will buy a ticket on Elon Musk's rocket to go to the moon, so I can drop rocks from the moon onto Brianna Wu. I will do that. I pledge this. I pledge this.
You can't drop rocks from the moon, guys. It's impossible. All right. I just want to pull this out.
What if you throw them really hard? I could. My son's in football camp. I could go with him and like get my arm.
Says, this isn't a sausage. This is a log. You are right, Slithering Peanut. This is indeed a damn log.
And now Brian's gonna have to make a bigger one because he had beaten me, and apparently we're in a competition now. I have the biggest sausage now, so that cannot stand. The biggest sausage cannot stand
the white waters.
The
log drivers waltz pleases.
Seriously, how can you not love these people?
It is 11 o'clock. It is 11 o'clock.
www.feedthebadger. Make sure that they can continue to annoy the crap out of me and make sausages the size of logs. Okay.
Even with
then we will ride those logs down a fucking river, Alison.
No. I'm in Ohio. We don't go in the rivers here. Anyway, like I said, it's over. It is 11 o'clock. It's 11:01 now because you guys interrupted. And even not counting the portion of the show where my computer decided we didn't need to have a show, it's still a long ass sausage. So I am going to thank all of our listeners for bearing with us through the length of this heavily interrupted sausage, including by my computer. I'd like to thank all of the guests, which are really hosts, co-hosts on the show, everybody that's been involved. I'd like to thank everybody that has helped to make this show happen. Thank poor Doc for having to go through all of this and separate out stuff because 2 of the 4 recordings died in the middle. Thank you all and good night.